A dark side of Europe's past will be exposed by one of the state's hottest choreographers in the latest Australian dance theatre production. The history of human zoos was revealed to young dancer Tom Fonwa while touring Germany, as Matthew Smith reports.
If you think the world's a mess now, you'll be horrified to learn that it used to be much, much worse. From the metal contraption that physically prevented women from speaking out, to the caged humans displayed like zoo animals, history's made it clear that the world has always been a pretty messed up place. So, has humanity actually come a long way? Or are we just getting better at hiding out worse tendencies? 1. The Radium Girls. Imagine it's the 1920s, and your job is painting numbers on watches using radium, a substance that literally glows in the dark. Sounds pretty cool, right? Except no one told them radium was radioactive. While the scientists working with radium were suited up like they were handling nuclear bombs, the Radium Girls, as they became known, were told the glowing substance was totally safe. In fact, they were even instructed to lick their brushes to get a finer point. Yup, licking radioactive paint. The girls, unaware of the danger, thought it was fun to paint their nails, teeth, and even faces with radium to glow when they went out at night. But the fun turned into a nightmare. Over time, many of them developed agonizing cancers, and their jaws deteriorated so badly they became known for having radium jaw, where their bones essentially dissolved. While the company ignored their suffering and denied any responsibility, these women fought back, becoming pioneers for worker safety. The Radium Girls' glowing tragedy ultimately led to regulations protecting workers from dangerous substances, but the damage had already been done. Glowing in the dark lost its charm when it came with a side of a slow, painful end. 2. The saintly facade of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, she's the face of compassion, right? For decades, she's been adored as a saintly icon for the poor, a beacon of hope in a cruel world. But let's pull back the curtain on this so-called saint and reveal the disturbing truth. She was basically an evil villain in disguise, a puppet dancing to the Vatican's tune. While everyone was busy praising her for her charitable work, stories surfaced that painted a much darker picture. This woman notoriously refused to provide adequate pain relief for terminally ill patients, insisting that suffering was a way for them to draw closer to God. Seriously? Imagine telling someone on their last legs that their suffering is a blessing. And if you didn't believe in God, well, she labeled you as mental, actually going on record to say this. She clearly lacked empathy for those with different beliefs. She even poured millions into the Vatican Bank, prioritizing the church's image over actual people in need. It's said she donated more than some entire countries. And when scandal hit, like the widespread institutional sexual abuse, she stood by the church, defending its reputation instead of the victims. So, while everyone's been busy putting her on a pedestal, it's time we recognize that Mother Teresa wasn't just a compassionate figure. She was a weapon of propaganda for the Vatican, masking exploitation behind a smile. 3. The Scold's Bridle. The Scold's Bridle sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? This twisted contraption from 17th century Europe was all about silencing those chatty ladies who dared to gossip or nag. We're talking about a metal mask that forced their mouths wide open, leaving them utterly powerless to speak. So how did this monstrosity actually work? The bridle was designed with a headpiece that wrapped around the skull, holding the woman in place, while a metal bit kept her mouth gaping wide. The whole setup was secured with a lock, ensuring that the scold couldn't just wriggle free. With a strap across the forehead and another around the chin, it immobilized the wearer, forcing her into a state of utter humiliation. 4. The Rats of Rage. The tale of rat torture reads like a horror movie script, but this was a grim reality during medieval times. Imagine a metal container filled with a live rat placed right on someone's belly. Seems innocent enough, right? Wrong. This wasn't a cute petting zoo moment, it was a medieval nightmare. The container was heated, and the rat, trapped and terrified, would go into a full-blown panic. In its desperate attempt to escape, it would claw and gnaw its way through flesh. It's a gruesome image that's hard to shake off. 5. The Last Human Zoo. In 1958, Belgium hosted the World Expo in Brussels, and one of its attractions was ridiculously horrifying: a human zoo. Yep, you heard that right. They put actual Congolese people on display, living behind fences in what they called an authentic African village. Visitors treated them like animals, throwing food and staring like it was some kind of sideshow. Hard to believe this was only 66 years ago. But Belgium wasn't alone in its actions. Germany had a pretty messed up history with human zoos too, especially in the late 1800s, when Karl Hagenbeck decided it would be cool to parade people from Africa, Asia, and the Americas in these fake native villages for public entertainment. And get this, Otabenga, a Congolese man, was actually displayed in the Bronx Zoo in New York in 1906. Yep, in a cage, with monkeys. His story ended tragically, and it shows just how far this twisted trend went. Human zoos weren't just some quirky part of history. They were an ugly display of racism and colonialism that stuck around way longer than anyone wants to admit. 6. The Dancing Plague of 1518. In the summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg were hit with one of the weirdest and most lethal dance crazes in history. A woman named Frau Trophea stepped out of her house and started dancing, and just didn't stop. Over the next few days, hundreds joined in, dancing uncontrollably. And this wasn't some fun block party. People were collapsing from exhaustion, some even dying from strokes or heart attacks. The weirdest part? No one knows why this plague of dance even started. Doctors back then chalked it up to hot blood, whatever that means, and their solution? More dancing. They hired musicians, hoping the dancers would get it out of their system, but that only made things worse. People literally danced themselves to an early grave. Theories about what caused this bizarre outbreak range from mass hysteria to ergot poisoning, a fungus on rye bread that can cause hallucinations. Think a medieval version of LSD. But no one's quite sure. What we do know is that for about a month, the people of Strasbourg were trapped in a nightmarish dance-off they couldn't escape. What started with one woman's jig spiraled into a fatal plague of rhythm gone wrong. 7. The Pirates Who Played Dirty. François L'Olonnais and his gang of pirates, they were straight-up nightmares on the high seas during the 1600s. These weren't your run-of-the-mill swashbucklers, they were out for treasure, and they weren't exactly known for playing nice to get it. When they captured prisoners, they didn't just ask for treasure maps, they'd encourage people to spill the beans through some seriously intense tactics. Let's just say, L'Olonnais wasn't shy about using his sword to make his point permanently. His crew? Oh, they took things to a whole new level. Instead of listening to the usual pirate threats, captives faced some creatively cruel punishments. We're talking about silencing people by force and, well, let's just say, shutting down their ability to talk permanently. Eyes? Not safe either. If that wasn't enough, they had this terrifying habit of using fire as a persuasion tool. And yes, they literally turned up the heat on their victims. The goal was always treasure, but it wasn't just about riches. It was about showing everyone who was boss. These guys left behind a wake of fear and destruction in every port they hit, building a reputation that made even the bravest sailors think twice before crossing their path. So, next time you hear about pirate legends, just remember, L'Ollonais and his crew weren't just after gold. They were all about commanding respect, by any means necessary. 8. Ireland's forgotten laundry girls. The Magdalen laundries. Sounds like a cute little spot, right? Wrong. These places were actually some of the darkest corners of 18th to late 20th century Ireland. Marketed as places to rehabilitate women deemed fallen, they were really just prisons disguised as laundries. So, what really went on behind those walls? Young girls and women, often unwed mothers, or simply accused of being a bit too flirtatious, were shipped off here to atone for their sins. But instead of finding a safe haven, they faced brutal conditions, forced to scrub laundry for endless hours under the unforgiving gaze of nuns who ruled with an iron fist. Their dignity stripped away, their freedom non-existent. Many spent years trapped in this oppressive nightmare. But wait, it gets even darker. Mass graves were discovered at some of these institutions, exposing the chilling truth of what really went down. Reports detail physical and emotional abuse that ran rampant, with women being separated from their children, who were sold off to other families in the name of adoption. Can you imagine the heartbreak? These places were never about helping. They were about power, cruelty, and dehumanization. It wasn't until the late 1990s that the public finally took notice of this dark chapter. Outrage erupted, leading to official apologies from the Irish government and the Catholic Church. 9. The Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden, a name that sounds straight out of a medieval horror story, and for good reason. Originating in 16th century Germany, this torture device was designed to maximize pain while prolonging suffering. This human-sized metal coffin had insides lined with spikes, just waiting for someone to be locked in. It was used on people who refused to pay taxes or committed crimes. But don't worry, those spikes weren't meant to end you instantly. Oh no, the whole point was to cause slow, agonizing pain. Once someone was shut inside, those spikes would pierce the body in all the wrong places, avoiding vital organs so the victim stayed alive, but in absolute torment. Blood loss, infection, and sheer agony were all part of the plan, turning torture into a drawn-out nightmare. Historians now argue about whether the Iron Maiden was actually used or if it was more of a myth. Either way, the idea of being trapped inside this spiked coffin is enough to send chills down anyone's spine. 10. The Great Emu War. The Great Emu War is one of those historical moments that sounds like a joke, but is 100% real. Picture this. It's 1932, and Australia is in a serious showdown with a flock of emus. Yeah, you heard that right. Emus. After World War I, veterans were given land to farm in Western Australia. Everything seemed fine until tens of thousands of these tall, flightless birds decided to move in and feast on the farmers' precious wheat crops. Talk about uninvited guests. Frustrated farmers called in the big guns. Literally, the Australian government sent in the military, armed with machine guns, thinking they could quickly handle this feathered invasion. But the emus weren't having it. These birds were surprisingly quick, darting around like they were in an action movie. Imagine soldiers trying to line up shots while the emus zigzagged like pros. After several failed attempts, the military realized they were up against some crafty adversaries. Despite firing thousands of rounds, the soldiers managed to take down only a few hundred birds. In the end, the emus came out on top, leaving the military in disbelief. 11. The Jam Boys of Burma. The story of the Jam or Jelly Boys from colonial Burma is one of those historical moments that make you stop and wonder how such a thing ever happened. These young boys, covered head to toe in sticky jam, were forced to parade around British noblemen at outdoor events. Why? To act as human bug traps. Mosquitoes, flies, and all the other pests swarmed the boys instead of the privileged elites, who could relax in peace without the nuisance of buzzing insects. 12. Peter the Great's beard tax. Peter the Great had a vision. He wanted to modernize Russia and make it more like Western Europe. But apparently, that started with facial hair. In 1698, he introduced the infamous beard tax, forcing anyone who wanted to keep their beard to pay up. The idea was to get Russians to adopt a clean-shaven European look, but people weren't exactly happy about it. To enforce this odd tax, Peter had officials literally shave off beards on the spot for those who didn't comply. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to cough up a hefty fee and carry around a beard token as proof that you'd paid. Talk about beard policing. This token was a metal coin stamped with the phrase, "The beard is a useless burden," just to rub salt in the wound. Despite all the fuzz over beards, Peter didn't target everyone. Peasants were allowed to keep theirs, but had to pay the tax when entering cities. For nobles and merchants, though, it was pay up or say goodbye to your whiskers. Peter's beard tax wasn't just about style. It symbolized his push for modernization and his determination to break from old traditions. But let's be real. It's hard to imagine someone today being fined for a little facial hair. 13. The Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials were like the colonial version of a reality TV show gone horribly wrong. Think Survivor meets American Idol. But instead of voting people off the island, you're condemning them to an early end for witchcraft. Welcome to 1692 in Salem, Massachusetts, where fear and paranoia brewed faster than a cauldron on a witch's fire. It all kicked off when a group of young girls, including Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, started acting out in ways that could only be described as unusual. Fits, screaming, and maybe a little too much backtalk. Naturally, the townsfolk jumped to the conclusion that they must be under the spell of witches. And who were the unlucky targets? A motley crew of local women, including Tituba, a slave, and Sarah Good, a poor beggar. Talk about a witch hunt. The trials were a spectacle. Just imagine a courtroom where evidence was as slippery as a broomstick. Spectral evidence. That's right. People believed in ghostly apparitions was the name of the game. If someone claimed they saw a witch's spirit doing evil things, that was good enough to condemn someone to their end. It was like a bizarre game of telephone, where rumors turned fatal in no time. As accusations flew faster than a witch on her broom, even the most innocent people found themselves in hot water. Reverend Samuel Parris and Judge Samuel Sewall were among those fanning the flames of hysteria, eager to root out supposed evil. In the end, 20 people met a tragic fate, while Giles Corey decided to go down with a bit more dignity. He refused to plead and was pressed to deceasement under heavy stones. Talk about standing your ground. But by late 1692, reality struck the community like a splash of cold water. The frenzy began to lose its steam, and Governor William Phips realized the trials were about as credible as a ghost story told around a campfire. By 1693, most of the accused were released, and the trials were put to rest, leaving a legacy that would haunt American history forever. 14. The curious case of Washington's smile. George Washington's dentures are infamous for being made from some pretty unusual materials. Forget the pristine pearly whites of modern dentistry. His chompers were a hodgepodge of hippo ivory, animal teeth, and wait for it, human teeth. That's right, Washington's dentures included 6 teeth that were believed to be taken from slaves. This shocking detail paints a chilling picture of how his wealth was tied to the brutal realities of slavery. In 1784, Washington even shelled out cash for these teeth, proving just how far he was willing to go for a functional smile. Back then, dental care was a nightmare compared to today's modern practices. These dentures weren't just a cosmetic choice. They were a necessity for Washington, who struggled with dental issues his whole life. 15. Rhode Island accused vampire. If you thought New England's sinister history was just limited to the Salem witch trials, let's take a detour to Rhode Island for a real-life vampire case, because apparently Dracula had some American relatives. Enter Sarah Tillinghast, a girl from the late 18th century whose tragic passing sparked a chilling legend. Sarah's story begins with a classic 1700s epidemic, consumption, or as we call it today, tuberculosis. When Sarah fell victim to this nasty illness, the Tillinghast family was already down on their luck, but things got weirder when her siblings started dropping like flies soon after. One by one, 5 of Sarah's brothers and sisters also passed under mysterious circumstances. Cue the whispers. Was Sarah somehow responsible from beyond the grave? Her father, Stukely Tillinghast, was desperate to stop the alleged vampire attacks. Following local folklore, he and some neighbors made the ultimate creepy decision. They dug up Sarah's body. The goal? To remove her heart and burn it. A popular method of vampire prevention in that time. Apparently, once the heart was destroyed, the strange illness sweeping through the family stopped, and the surviving family members were safe from Sarah's posthumous rampage. Was this simply a coincidence, or something more sinister at play? 16. The Kentucky Meat Shower. Ever heard of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs? Well, Kentucky beat that movie to the punch by over a century with a real-life meat shower. That's right, in 1876, Bath County, Kentucky, experienced something straight out of a food-filled fever dream when chunks of meat literally fell from the sky. Forget spaghetti and meatballs. This was mystery meat in all its weird glory. It started with Mrs. Crouch, who was minding her own business on the farm, making soap, when suddenly pieces of red meat began raining down. We're talking chunks ranging from flakes to full-on slabs, covering her yard like some kind of carnivore's buffet. The best part? No one could figure out what the meat was, though a few brave souls gave it a taste, because of course someone had to, and claimed it tasted like mutton or venison. Theories flew in as fast as the meat. Some said it was vultures regurgitating their lunch mid-flight, while others leaned into more supernatural explanations. Whatever the reason, the Kentucky Meat Shower gave new meaning to the phrase, food falling from the sky. 17. The treadmill torture. In 19th century England, treadmills weren't just for burning off calories. They were instruments of punishment. The infamous treadmill, also known as the treadwheel, was a device used in prisons to break the will and spirit of inmates. Prisoners were forced to walk endlessly on wooden planks attached to a massive rotating wheel. Day after day, prisoners marched in place, powering the wheel without getting anywhere. Sometimes these wheels powered machinery but often they served no purpose. Up to 20 prisoners at a time endured this grueling task, their muscles burning as hours dragged on. With only brief breaks, the treadwheel wasn't reforming anyone. It was just breaking them down physically and mentally. This rehabilitation method was eventually abolished, but not before thousands suffered under its punishing pace. 18. The drunkard's cloak. Imagine if your punishment for getting a little too tipsy wasn't a fine or a night in the drunk tank, but a public walk of shame in what amounts to a wearable barrel. That's exactly what happened in 17th century England with the drunkard's cloak. Instead of just letting you sleep off your inebriation, the town would lock you into a barrel with holes for your head and arms and send you off on a little tour of public humiliation. You'd be paraded through the streets like a human keg, while the whole town got a good laugh at your expense. The punishment wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a full-on spectacle designed to shame you into sobriety. The idea was simple. If you looked ridiculous enough, maybe you'd think twice before indulging again. Other towns in Europe took up similar versions of the punishment, proving that the concept of public shaming had quite the reach. 19. The Great Stink of 1858. Picture this: London, 1858. The sun is shining and the city is bustling. But there's a problem, an epic problem. A noxious cloud of stink has taken over, turning one of the world's greatest cities into a scene straight out of a nightmare. Welcome to the Great Stink, where the River Thames became a toxic soup of human waste, industrial garbage, and rotting refuse. As the summer heat cranked up, so did the foulness. People were stepping outside only to be greeted by a wave of putrid odor that made them want to run back home. It got so bad that even the dignitaries in Parliament couldn't escape the smell. Imagine trying to debate important issues while battling the urge to gag. Quicklime was thrown around like confetti, but it did little to mask the stench of decaying organic matter. This horrid summer didn't just leave Londoners holding their noses, it was a wake-up call. The Great Stink forced the city to confront its unsanitary practices, leading to a complete overhaul of its waste management system. 20. The Spanish Tickler. The Spanish Tickler might sound innocent, but don't let the name fool you. This was a terrifying torture device used during the Inquisition. It was basically a set of sharp iron claws used to tear flesh from a person's body, like some twisted metal gardening rake. But instead of leaves, it's your skin on the chopping block. And no, this was not just reserved for hardened criminals. Just being accused of heresy, basically disagreeing with the wrong people, could land you in a room with one of these medieval nightmare tools. And once the Spanish Tickler came out, it wasn't just a little scrape here and there. They'd target your limbs, your torso, wherever they could inflict the most pain while keeping you conscious. Are we actually capable of learning from our past? Or is it just human nature to keep playing the same tragic tunes over and over and over again?